Okay, this is the first ReNature. This is the first ReNature webinar. As you are aware, we live in a different scenario than the last time we met, just a few months ago. Because as you remember, we had a very busy month in February and March for those who have joined us before. Um, but since then, everything has changed, and now we're forced to work from our offices or from home, and many of the meetings have been moved online. So ReNature is adapting, and we have also moved online. So this is the first ReNature webinar. It's our first online meeting, not the last, as I'm going to explain soon. And this is the program for today. It's just a 3 hour session. I mean, with research, with work we have been doing in ReNature. So now the ReNature project, which maybe I can say a few words about the ReNature project, is a twinning project between AMCAS, between the Trinity College Dublin, the University of Trento, the University of East Anglia, and probably soon the University of Cambridge, and also Pensoft. So we're a small team of 5, 6 partners, and we have been meeting regularly over the past 18, 19 months. And our objective is to kickstart research, to develop the capacity to do research in nature-based solutions in Malta and also in Mediterranean environments. And I think this is also the focus of our presentations today. Um, Most of this research is collaborative research, um, and we have been meeting uh, within the consortium, but also within the with the wider community within which we are embedded, basically. And we've met the stakeholders, the practitioners working in Malta, in other Mediterranean islands, and also working in other settings as well. Okay, today we have 4 presentations. I'm going to start by basically describing some of our work, the approach actually in ReNature. That's my presentation. Then Marcus will talk about different types of nature-based solutions. Um, Miriam Grace today with us, working with Lindex from the University of Cambridge. They will be talking about the results of a workshop and knowledge needs analysis we did together last year, I think. Now, Miriam, and we have the first results. This is also now in the form of a paper, which should be published soon, I guess. And uh, and finally, Davide Generaletti and Davide Longato from the University of Trento will talk about planning for nature-based solutions in urban areas. Depending on the time, we may have some. We may allow some minutes for questions after each presentation, but there's also a feedback and closing session where we can have a wider discussion, and an opportunity to answer questions. Also, there's a Q&A section in Zoom, so feel free to send us out your questions. There is already one question from Tyke McIntyre, who's also on our advisory board for ReNature. Feel free to send us more questions. The speakers may answer the questions during the presentation or after the presentation, or even at the end of this webinar. So this is the vision of ReNature. We want to foster transdisciplinarity. We think that there's an opportunity to increase collaboration across sectors, to bring stakeholders together for knowledge co-creation and also implementation of nature-based solutions. Those are the partner countries. I've already mentioned that, and these are some of our key objectives. So we focus on capacity building. That's a photo. Some of you who are also with us today are also in that photo. That's a photo from uh, I think end of February this year. We've been meeting often. I mentioned that, and that's in Malta. And our colleague Steve is actually taking this photo with a drone because we had a training about using drones for monitoring green infrastructure. So capacity building is one of the focuses of our ReNature project. We talk about participatory processes and we practice some of these, as I've already mentioned. We're going to work on knowledge synthesis. That's one of our next tasks. We're sharing open data, openly sharing data, and we're also thinking about transition of research into practical solutions. So how can we facilitate the shift between from research to practical solutions? Those are our key themes. I think we are we have been relatively effective in um, in developing a national cluster. We don't really call it that way, but we have been meeting so often that um, I, here in Malta, we know who is working on this, and we are meeting so often that people are actually joining the meetings on a regular basis. So I think we have been effective in creating this cluster, so everyone knows who is working on what and how we can collaborate. Um, so I've mentioned capacity building. Those are two recent photos. One is from last year. That's the summer school. We were planning to have another summer school this September, but that's postponed to January or February. The summer schools target PhD students, and that was the summer school we have had last year. And some of our attendees here actually were actually students in this summer school. And this was held in collaboration with the Coast Action Circular City, and that's the very nice ReNature training course we have had in Trento. It's my last visit out of Malta actually before COVID, Davide. So so it's a very nice memories of this training course. After that, when we had one more training course in Malta and at the end of February. We have shifted online, so we have moved online, and now is also the time to launch our next training course. So this is the fifth training course now, and we're talking about nature-based solutions and the science policy interface. Uh, so we have experts from a few European countries and experts working in nature-based solutions and working across the science policy interface. So this is the program. It's a training course over 3 days, 3 hours per day, more or less, and we have experts from this ReNature community, but also from outside the ReNature community. So this is day one. It's the 14th of September, and we have Davide, myself, and a colleague from the European Commission who will be talking about the policy context of nature-based solutions in Europe and also possibly in member states and beyond. We have Marcus Collier, who has also managed a session about with breakout groups about nature-based solutions in cities, about what solutions are there. Second day, we talk about designing nature-based solutions. We talk about the effectiveness of current nature-based solutions or urban ecosystems. We have a session about planning nature-based solution metropolitan landscapes by Professor Christian Albert, and establishing nature-based solutions knowledge networks for urban resilience by Dr. Timon McPherson from New York New School. On the third day, Dr. Lindix from the University of Cambridge will talk about interaction with policymakers. Anna was also a colleague and one of the panelists with us. We'll be talking about communication, so how to communicate key messages. And finally, Professor Jane Stout from Trinity College Dublin will talk about one effective example where research and academia and also the policy context have managed to come up with a plan, the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So how to bring people together. And that's the end of the training course. The registration is already open. We hope to have you with us. In the coming days, we will be also launching the training course online via our website and social media. But if you copy this link, it's already you can already register for this training course. And that brings me to my presentation. So the first presentation is about identifying nature-based solutions to societal challenges. And here I'm going to talk about the approach we are adopting in ReNature. And this is also the topic of a paper, a practitioner's paper we are currently preparing with some colleagues working in the sector in Malta and beyond. So Okay, why do we need nature-based solutions? And here I have referred to existing literature. Basically, we know that there are a number of societal challenges going from climate change. We live in some of us actually live in the Mediterranean, which we know, for example, is a hotspot for climate change. If you look at, we work in Malta, so if you look at records for climate change, you know that, for example, the temperatures in summer have increased rapidly. We may also have different precipitation patterns, so and that is creating a problem. A disaster risk, water security. We know that this could be could become a problem in the future. It's a problem already, but also more in the future. Food security, human health, and socio-economic development. These are the societal challenges identified by the IUCN. Of course, we can classify them in different categories. There's another categorization by the EU, um, the European Union strategy for renaturing cities, and so on. But this is one of the classifications that is currently being used by the IUCN. In the past, tackling these challenges, to tackle these challenges, we have focused on gray solutions, on gray infrastructure, but that may have not always solved all of the problems, and it may have led to the intensification of the management, leading to biodiversity loss, leading to inequalities and global human vulnerability. So nature-based solutions is also recognized by the EU biodiversity strategy now recently published, can address these societal challenges um, whilst benefiting people and nature. Um, so here you have two definitions. What do we mean by nature-based solutions? I'm not going to read this. I assume that several of you are familiar with this, but if you compare the two definitions, you will probably realize that there's a focus on nature-based solutions being solutions or actions targeting specific societal challenges. So it's not just they can be considered as being green infrastructure, but it's more. I think the definition is more precise, focusing on the solutions to the challenges. So what solutions can be implemented? I think from my perspective, a positive development was the recent changing to the definition, now also focusing on improved biodiversity, increased ecosystem services. And this is also something where the EU, I think the EU definition and the IUCN definition are also now matching in terms of improved benefits to biodiversity and in ecosystem service provisions. Um, so we're going to share the experience now in ReNature and more specifically in Malta where I am working, and then David and Marcus and Miriam will also talk maybe about different contexts as well. Um, we live in a small island state with high urbanization. As I already mentioned, there's possibility of strong impacts of climate change. Okay, we also are aware that these islands, the Mediterranean itself, is actually a hotspot of biodiversity. So all of this makes Malta, makes the Mediterranean, other islands, a nice case study for investigating how to improve biodiversity and tackling these pressing challenges, societal challenges that there are, including, for example, climate change and biodiversity loss. Something about Malta is actually that we have high level of urbanization, I believe, up to 30%, and a bit more of the land is urban land cover, and I think yeah, most of the remaining land cover is actually agricultural land. So semi-natural ecosystems make up only a small proportion. There was, because now we have the COVID situation, but before that we had very high number of tourists, up more than 2 million tourists per year in an area of 316 kilometers squared, population density of inhabitants of 1,400 uh, persons per square kilometer. So that puts a huge pressure on the natural environment and on ecosystems. And well, it's if you scan through the news, you'll find a lot of reference to these societal challenges, um, and it's not very different from other Mediterranean environment. And this is from the IUCN report of 2009 about nature-based solutions and strategic elements for renaturing cities. So climate change, heat island effect, air pollution, noise-related illnesses, and so on. And this report goes on to suggest some of the changes that are required. So, for example, nature should now be seen as a solution rather than just simply something to protect or to conserve. And cities should be managed as ecosystems. Um, and this requires multi-level, multi-sector integration. And also some changes, like for example, citizens not just being pedestrians, so giving space back to citizens and not just for moving from one place to another, and so on. So based on this context, based on the challenges that there are that we face, I think ReNature has sort of come up with a toolkit, with a, we can call it toolkit, we can call it strategy, with a way of dealing with this. And these are actually our work packages, but also our work packages and our discussion modified and amended through discussion with our stakeholders, with the practitioners out there. So these are the 4 steps that we are considering, and I'm going to tackle them one by one. The first step is actually evaluate societal challenges, and I think nowadays we see a lot of focus about green infrastructure, about nature in cities, nature-based solutions, but being solutions, we should talk about the challenges first, to then come up with solutions to solve these problems or these challenges. And one of the key issues is that at the moment we don't really factor in nature when we talk about solutions. And this diagram is showing here green infrastructure area against ecosystem services. So the benefit we get from green infrastructure, and you see that, of course, the more there is green infrastructure, the more there are ecosystem services, the higher the ecosystem service capacity. But green infrastructure also declines with population density. This is the case study is here is Malta, national study. So we're talking the national territory of Malta, the territory, all the localities. And we're talking about very high population densities in some cities, going up to, I don't know, 13, 15,000 persons per square kilometer. And there's huge variation from that level to very low population densities, or relatively low population densities. So all of these diagrams are basically showing that the way we have planned cities so far means that we have lost many ecosystem services from the cities. And green infrastructure is actually at the periphery. It's not within the city. So that means that some of the problems, like for example, having areas providing shade in summer. We live in the Mediterranean where temperatures can go up in high 30s in summer, and sometimes even more than that. Well, what about the access to those spaces? And therefore, that if you don't have access to those spaces, you could have a problem in terms of the regulating ecosystem services. So regulating the temperature, regulating surface runoff, but also in terms of space for recreation, potentially also for tourism. And this is a map of green infrastructure in the 2 local plans. This is a collaboration that we have with the planning authority here, and planning authority in Malta. And you can see that most of the green infrastructure is at the periphery. And also the cities are actually have very low soil cover. There's a lot of soil seeding and very low tree cover. And as we will see, that is also linked to the loss of many services and also possibly affecting different groups differently. And so these are some of the benefits. So I was talking about cooling effect, and this is the expected temperature. So how much cooling we have from green infrastructure, based on a model developed by our colleagues from the University of Trento, and also from actual data. So data from green urban spaces, and you see how much of a positive effect these spaces have in terms of temperature reduction. But the problem is if you don't have access to these spaces, if you live far away from these spaces, then you could have a problem with that. I mean, it could be a societal challenge. The access to these spaces could be a societal challenge in itself, and that brings with it other problems related to the service and the benefits we mentioned before. So there are these challenges, and the challenges are multifaceted, are have different, are linked together as well. And you may not always have all the environmental data for these challenges. So one of the aspects which we consider as being critical is to involve stakeholders, to build, to consider the evidence base and try to build this evidence base as much as possible. And that is what we have been doing. So one of our, we consider this as a process. So capacity building as being a process to increase, to improve the evidence base, basically. And this is what we have been doing. So these are some of the training courses. We focused on land monitoring, biodiversity monitoring. We have both focused on mainstreaming nature-based solutions in planning and policy making, nature-based solutions in urban planning, nature-based solutions in rural landscapes, and interdisciplinary approaches to renaturing cities. So we see capacity building as part of the solution to the lack of environmental data, socioeconomic data, about nature-based solutions, and about the impacts these could have. We also, Miriam is going to talk more about this soon. Participatory approaches. This is a workshop that we have held together with some of our practitioner colleagues in Malta, and we asked them what are the societal challenges. What are the societal challenges, and what are the knowledge gaps? So how are we going to ensure that there's implementation of nature-based solutions, but what is actually missing at the moment? So what do we need to focus on in our knowledge synthesis approaches? And I can talk about a few examples where this has been finalized already. So this is another collaboration that we have in another project, and this is about ecological focus areas in the common agricultural policy. And we know that there's not always data available about the effectiveness of ecological focus areas in terms of their impact on biodiversity or ecosystem services. So in this paper, through a stakeholder participatory approach, we brought practitioners and experts from different countries, well, all over Europe, and we assessed how the current implementation of these ecological focus areas in the common agricultural policy is working now. So there's a ranking process, there's a Delphi process, which similar to what we have done in ReNature. Miriam, then if I'm mistaken, or if you'd like to add anything, you can say more about this. But there's a Delphi process, so there's a ranking process of how effective these management actions are now at the moment, and then what if these ecological focus areas are managed more efficiently? How well they could be in providing habitat and benefits, in this case, to pollinators. So it's a process, it's a participatory process, which can be used when environmental, or in other cases, other types of data are not available.